When your husband decides to announce your marriage is over via text, you'd expect at least a crying jag. Instead, I laughed so hard I snorted coffee all over my nurse's scrubs. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 12 years keeping hearts beating, only to discover mine had been flatlined for months. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Marriage terminated. Moving out today. Don't make this difficult. Miles. Not, I'm sorry. Not, we need to talk. Just clinical efficiency, like he was canceling a dentist appointment. I should have seen it coming. The forgotten anniversary dinner 3 weeks ago when he spent 2 hours on his phone handling a client emergency. The way he'd started saying Julia thinks in every conversation. Julia from his consulting firm with her perfect highlights and MBA from Wharton. I'm Adeline Crawford, 34, head cardiac nurse at St. Cecilia's Hospital. I save lives for a living, which makes it particularly galling that I didn't notice my own marriage dying right in front of me. The signs were all there. Miles Bennett, my husband of 8 years, had been pulling away like a patient going into shock. Cold skin, distant stare, barely responsive to stimulation. Classic symptoms I'd missed because I was too busy keeping other people's hearts pumping. 3 months ago, he stopped wearing his wedding ring. It gets in the way during presentations, he'd said. 2 months ago, he started working late every night. Big client, you understand. Last month, he moved into the guest bedroom. Your alarm wakes me up too early. I should have performed an intervention then. Instead, I kept hoping he'd stabilize on his own. Now, staring at his text in the hospital break room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete clarity. The kind that comes when you stop the compressions and call time of passing. I typed back, locks changed at 6 p.m. Your stuff will be in boxes by the door. Collect it like the garbage you are. Then I turned off my phone, washed my hands with scalding water, a ritual that had never felt more symbolic, and went back to work. Mrs. Patterson in room 314 needed her post-op vitals checked, and unlike my marriage, she was worth saving. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of medical efficiency. Check pulse, administer medication, monitor recovery. Simple, logical steps with predictable outcomes. Nothing like the chaos Miles had just dumped in my lap. At 6:30, I finally headed home to my apartment in the upscale Crawford Commons. Miles had loved this place when we'd moved in 5 years ago. It screams success, he'd said, admiring the granite countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows. What it actually screamed was overpriced suburban pretension, but I'd gone along with it because that's what wives do, right? Support their husband's vision of the perfect life. The hallway was mercifully empty when I arrived. No sign of Miles or his dramatic exit. I'd half expected to find him camped outside the door, ready to negotiate or grovel. Instead, I found Marcus, our building's doorman, waiting by the elevator with a knowing smirk. Heard you had some excitement today, Marcus said. He was 46, built like a linebacker, and had the best gossip network in the building. Your husband tried to sweet-talk me into letting him back up around 4, told him the locks were changed and he wasn't on the approved list anymore. What did he say to that? Nothing printable, though he did mention something about calling his mother. I groaned. Margaret Bennett, Miles' 62-year-old mother, was a force of nature who'd never met a problem she couldn't solve with money, connections, or sheer stubborn will. She lived in Scottsdale now, but she'd hop on a plane to Seattle faster than you could say family crisis. Thanks for the heads up, Marcus. If she shows up, I'll treat her with all the respect she deserves, he said with a grin that suggested Margaret was in for a surprise. Inside the apartment, I surveyed the damage of 8 years of marriage. Miles had been thorough in his packing, too thorough. He'd taken the good coffee maker, the expensive wine glasses, and even the throw pillows I'd bought for the couch. What he'd left behind told the real story. Wedding photos shoved in a drawer, his collection of self-help books about maximizing potential, and a stack of business cards from the networking events he'd dragged me to. I opened a bottle of the cheap wine he'd left behind and started going through the remnants of our life together. Here was the card from our 5th anniversary, where he'd written, "To many more adventures." There was the program from his company's Christmas party last year, where Julia had been introduced as the rising star of strategic development. The pieces clicked together like symptoms forming a diagnosis. Julia's name appearing in conversations, Miles's sudden interest in reinventing himself professionally, the way he'd started dressing better, working out more, talking about expanding his horizons. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline, my former friend from the building's social committee. Heard about you and Miles. So sorry. Call me if you need to talk. Caroline had been Team Miles from day one, always talking about what a catch he was and how lucky I was to land such an ambitious man. Her sympathy felt about as genuine as a politician's campaign promise. I was halfway through my second glass of wine when the landline rang. Miles's name appeared on the caller ID, which meant he was probably calling from his office. I let it go to voicemail. Adeline, we need to discuss this rationally. I know you're upset, but there's no need to be vindictive about it. I'll be by tomorrow to get the rest of my things. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Vindictive? The man who'd ended our marriage via text was lecturing me about making things hard? I poured another glass of wine and called Tommy, a locksmith I'd met through the hospital. Tommy had changed the locks on half the houses in our neighborhood after various domestic situations, and he never asked unnecessary questions. Need the full security package? Tommy asked when I explained the situation. The whole setup, security locks, chain locks, and one of those camera doorbells. Smart woman, I can be there first thing tomorrow morning. As I hung up, my phone started buzzing with another call. Margaret's number flashed on the screen. I considered answering, then decided I wasn't drunk enough for that conversation yet. Instead, I walked to the bedroom and started packing the last of Miles's belongings. His expensive suits, his collection of motivational audiobooks, his electric toothbrush. Each item went into a box with more force than strictly necessary. At the bottom of his dresser drawer, I found something that made me pause, a leather journal I'd given him for his birthday 3 years ago. I'd encouraged him to write down his thoughts, his goals, maybe even some gratitude. The pages were mostly empty, except for a few entries from last year. Feel like I'm sleepwalking through my own life. When did everything become so routine? Adeline's always at the hospital, I'm always at the office. We're like roommates who happen to share a mortgage. And later, Julia asked me what my 5-year plan was today. Realized I don't have one. Haven't thought about the future in years. Is this what settling looks like? The final entry was dated 2 months ago. Told Julia about feeling trapped. She said successful people don't wait for permission to change their lives. Maybe she's right. I closed the journal and dropped it in the box with everything else. Miles could take his existential crisis and his 5-year plan and figure them out somewhere else. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "This is Julia. We should talk." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "We have nothing to discuss. Enjoy your prize." Then I blocked the number, finished my wine, and went to bed in the middle of my king-sized bed for the first time in 8 years. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of untangling a marriage. Tonight, I was going to sleep better than I had in months. The last thing I heard before drifting off was my phone buzzing with another call from Margaret. I smiled and turned off the ringer. Some conversations could wait until I'd had coffee. Tommy arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, carrying a toolbox that looked like it could secure Fort Knox. He was a wiry guy in his 50s with calloused hands and the no-nonsense attitude of someone who'd seen every variety of domestic drama Seattle had to offer. "Standard package includes security locks, chain lock, and security camera," he said, examining my door. "But given what you told me about your husband, I'd recommend the deluxe treatment. Motion sensors, reinforced strike plates, the works." "Do it," I said, handing him a cup of coffee. "I want this place locked down tighter than the cardiac ICU." While Tommy worked, I drove to Washington Federal Bank to handle the financial surgery. Miles and I had joint accounts for everything: checking, savings, credit cards. That was about to change. The bank manager, a pleasant woman named Patricia, walked me through the process with professional sympathy. "We see this a lot," she said, pulling up our account information. "The good news is everything's pretty straightforward. No unusual activity, no large withdrawals. What about credit cards? I can remove you from joint cards and set up individual accounts immediately. Any recent purchases you're concerned about?" I thought about Miles's sudden wardrobe upgrade and Julia's expensive tastes. "Can you show me the last 3 months of activity?" The statement told an interesting story. Dinner at Le Bernardin, Seattle's most expensive restaurant, on a night when Miles had told me he was working late. A weekend stay at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel when he'd claimed to be at a client retreat in Portland. Multiple charges at Victoria's Secret, which was particularly galling since Miles had been buying me practical gifts like coffee mugs and gift cards for the past 2 years. "I want to transfer exactly half of our joint savings into a new individual account," I said, "and close all joint credit cards effective immediately." "That's well within your rights," Patricia said. "I'll also set up overdraft protection on your new accounts and issue you temporary cards today." By the time I finished at the bank, I felt like I'd just completed a successful triple bypass. Miles's financial access to our life together had been severed cleanly and permanently. I drove back to the apartment to find Tommy putting finishing touches on what looked like a fortress entrance. The new security locks was a thing of beauty, solid steel with a key code backup. The camera doorbell gave me a clear view of the hallway, and motion sensors would alert my phone to any activity. "Your husband tries to get in here now. He'll need a battering ram," Tommy said with satisfaction. "And if he brings one, you'll have video evidence for the police." I paid Tommy in cash and added a generous tip. "Thanks. I have a feeling I'm going to need all the security I can get." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Miles. "Coming by at noon to get my things. Have them ready." I typed back, "Your things are in boxes by the door. New locks installed. You have 5 minutes to collect everything, or it goes to Goodwill." Then I called Marcus downstairs. "Miles is coming by at noon. He's no longer a resident, so he doesn't get building access without my permission?" "Understood. Want me to handle this diplomatically or with enthusiasm? Surprise me?" I spent the morning rearranging furniture and claiming space that had been subtly dominated by Miles's presence. His leather recliner went to the storage unit in the basement. His collection of business books went into boxes. The living room suddenly felt twice as large. At 11:30, I positioned myself at the window with a cup of coffee and waited for the show to begin. Miles arrived precisely at noon, looking like he was heading into a hostile takeover meeting. Expensive suit, confident stride, the whole corporate warrior act. He was accompanied by his brother David, who carried a clipboard and wore the expression of a man who'd been drafted into someone else's drama. I watched through the security camera as Miles approached the front desk. Marcus's response was everything I'd hoped for. Polite, but immovable. Miles gestured emphatically. Marcus shrugged and pointed to the phone. The conversation escalated until Miles was clearly shouting, though I couldn't hear the words through the thick glass. That's when Margaret arrived. Miles's mother emerged from a Blacktown car like a general preparing for battle. At 62, Margaret Bennett was still formidable. Perfectly coiffed silver hair, designer suit, and the kind of confidence that came from decades of getting her way through sheer force of personality. She marched into the lobby and immediately took charge of the situation. Even through the window, I could see her laying down the law to Marcus, who listened with the patient expression of a man who dealt with difficult people his entire career. My phone rang, building landline. "Mrs. Crawford? This is Marcus. I have a Mrs. Margaret Bennett here who claims to be your mother-in-law. She's demanding access to your apartment and threatening to call the police if I don't comply." "Put her on." A moment later, Margaret's imperious voice filled my ear. "Adeline, this nonsense has gone on long enough. I'm coming up to discuss this situation like adults." "Oh, actually, Margaret, you're not. Miles can collect his belongings from the hallway, but neither of you is coming into my apartment." "Don't be ridiculous. We're family." "We're family." Past tense. Miles ended that relationship via text message yesterday. He made a mistake. He made a choice. Now he can live with the consequences. I hung up and called down to Marcus. "Send Miles up alone. He gets 5 minutes to collect his boxes, then I want all 3 of them out of the building." Through the security camera, I watched Miles ride the elevator up with the expression of a man heading to his own execution. When he reached my floor, I opened the door just wide enough to reveal the stack of boxes waiting in the hallway. 5 minutes, I said through the chain lock. Everything's there. "Adeline, we need to talk about this. We really don't. Your stuff, 5 minutes, then you're trespassing." Miles looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my tone must have convinced him I was serious. He started loading boxes onto a luggage cart he'd brought up. Designer clothes, electronics, books, toiletries, the accumulated debris of 8 years reduced to 6 cardboard boxes. "This is crazy," he said as he worked. "You're acting like I committed some kind of crime." "You did. You committed fraud. 8 years of pretending to be someone you're not." "I never lied to you." "You lied every day for months. Every time you said you were working late when you were with Julia. Every time you said you loved me when you were planning your exit strategy. Every time you promised we'd work things out when you were already halfway out the door." Miles stopped packing and looked directly at the camera. "I never meant for it to happen this way." "But you're glad it did. Don't pretend this isn't exactly what you wanted. Permission to start over without the inconvenience of an honest conversation." He finished loading the last box in silence. As he wheeled the cart toward the elevator, he turned back one final time. "I did love you, Adeline. I stopped being able to remember why." "Then you should have said that 8 years ago and saved us both the trouble." After Miles left, I watched through the window as the 3 of them had what looked like a heated discussion in the parking lot. Margaret was clearly giving Miles a piece of her mind, while David stood to the side taking notes on his clipboard. Finally, Margaret got back in her town car and drove away. David followed in his Prius. Miles sat in his BMW for another 10 minutes, staring up at the building, before finally driving off. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. Saw the drama in the parking lot. Are you okay? Want to grab coffee and talk? I stared at the message for a long moment. Caroline had been my closest friend in the building for 3 years. We'd served on the social committee together, hosted dinner parties, shared gossip over wine on Friday nights. But I remembered how quickly she'd sided with Miles during our last few arguments, how she'd always found ways to excuse his behavior while questioning mine. I typed back, Thanks, but I'm fine. Don't need to talk. She responded immediately. Come on, don't shut me out. I know you're hurting, but isolating yourself isn't the answer. I'm not isolating myself. I'm choosing better company. That's not fair. I've always been a good friend to you. Have you? Because I remember you telling me I was too demanding when I complained about Miles working late every night. I remember you saying I should be more supportive of his career goals when he started talking about making major life changes without consulting me. Good friends don't automatically assume the wife is the problem. My phone stayed silent after that. I poured myself a glass of the good wine I'd hidden from Miles and surveyed my reclaimed territory. The apartment felt different already, lighter, less cluttered with unspoken resentments and compromised dreams. Tomorrow I'd start the legal proceedings for divorce. Tonight, I was going to order Thai food, watch whatever I wanted on Netflix, and sleep in the middle of my bed without someone complaining about my alarm clock. For the first time in months, my heart felt like it was beating at a normal rhythm. I woke up to 17 missed calls from Miles and a text from Julia. We need to talk about Miles. He's not handling this well. The audacity was breathtaking. The woman who'd helped destroy my marriage was now concerned about the emotional fallout. I blocked her number and headed to work, where at least the problems had clear solutions. St. Cecilia's Hospital was in full morning chaos when I arrived. 3 cardiac emergencies had come in overnight. The ICU was at capacity, and Dr. Martinez was looking for me the moment I walked through the doors. Adeline, thank God. Mrs. Patterson took a turn last night. Irregular heartbeat, pressure dropping. She's stable now, but she's asking for you specifically. I found Mrs. Patterson in room 314, looking small and fragile against the white sheets. She was 73, a retired teacher who'd come in for routine valve replacement surgery and developed complications. Her daughter sat beside the bed, holding her hand. There's my favorite nurse, Mrs. Patterson said weakly. I heard you had some excitement yesterday. Hospital gossip traveled faster than infection. Nothing I couldn't handle. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck, but alive. That's something, right? That's everything, I said, checking her monitors. Heart rate steady, pressure improving. Your numbers look good. You're going to be fine. I heard about your husband, she said quietly. Men can be such fools. Some of them, yes. My Harold left me for his secretary 30 years ago. Thought he was trading up for a younger model. Last I heard, she'd left him for someone even younger. Funny how that works. Mrs. Patterson's daughter squeezed her mother's hand. Mom always said the best revenge is living well. Smart woman, I said, adjusting her IV. But sometimes a little creative justice doesn't hurt either. I spent the morning catching up on patient care and trying to ignore the constant buzzing of my phone. Miles had apparently decided that persistence was the key to reconciliation. By lunch, he'd sent 43 text messages ranging from apologetic to angry to desperate. I made a mistake. Can we please talk about this like adults? You're being completely unreasonable. This affects both of us. Julia was right about you. You're vindictive and controlling. I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. Please give me a chance to explain. My mother thinks we should try counseling. Fine. Keep the apartment. I just want my grandmother's watch back. That last one made me laugh. Miles's grandmother's watch was a cheap Timex she'd bought at Woolworth's in 1962. It was sitting in my jewelry box, and it was going to stay there until Miles learned some manners. During my lunch break, I drove to Miles's consulting firm. The offices of Bennett and Associates occupied the top floor of a glass tower downtown, all sleek furniture and motivational posters about synergistic solutions and paradigm optimization. The kind of place that took itself very seriously while producing very little of actual value. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile, looked up as I approached. Can I help you? I'm here to see Julia Whitman. Do you have an appointment? Tell her it's Adeline Crawford. She'll want to see me. 5 minutes later, Julia emerged from the elevator looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. She was prettier in person than in the photos I'd seen, blonde, polished, with the kind of aggressive competence that intimidated weak men like Miles. We should talk privately, she said, leading me to a small conference room. This won't take long, I said, closing the door behind us. I got your text about Miles not handling things well. I wanted to assure you that's not my problem anymore. Look, I know you're angry. I'm not angry. Angry would imply I still care about the outcome. I'm just here to clarify a few things. Julia sat down and crossed her legs, trying to project confidence. Miles told me you two had been having problems for months. I'm sure he did. Men like Miles are very good at rewriting history to justify their choices. What did he tell you? That I was cold, demanding, that I didn't understand his vision for the future? Something like that. And you believed him because it made you feel better about what you were doing. Julia's composure slipped slightly. It wasn't like that. We didn't plan for this to happen. Of course you didn't. You just happened to fall into bed together while he was married to someone else. These things just happen, right? Like natural disasters or tax audits. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You saw a successful man who was bored with his life and convinced him that trading up was the solution to his problems. The question is, what happens now that he's not successful anymore? What do you mean? I smiled. Miles is about to discover that divorce is expensive and messy and that his reputation in this city is about to take a serious hit. His mother is furious, his brother thinks he's an idiot, and his soon-to-be ex-wife has no intention of making this easy for him. Are you sure he's still the prize you thought he was? Julia was quiet for a long moment. He said you'd try to turn me against him. I don't need to turn you against him, Julia. He'll do that himself soon enough. Men who abandon their wives for other women have a habit of abandoning those other women when the next shiny object comes along. I stood up and headed for the door. Enjoy your victory. Something tells me it's going to be shorter than you expected. As I left the building, my phone rang. Miles again. What did you say to Julia? He demanded. She won't take my calls. I told her the truth, something you should have tried months ago. You had no right. I had every right. You made this my business when you decided to blow up our marriage. Now you get to deal with the consequences. Adeline, please, we need to work this out. I can't afford... I hung up and blocked his number. If Miles wanted to communicate with me, he could do it through lawyers. That evening, I stopped by the building's mailroom and found a certified letter waiting for me. Margaret had retained a law firm to facilitate a reasonable resolution to this unfortunate situation. The letter suggested that I was being unnecessarily vindictive and that cooler heads should prevail. I called the law firm and asked to speak with the attorney who'd signed the letter. This is regarding the Bennett matter, I told his secretary. I'd like to clarify something for your client. When the lawyer came on the line, I was professionally polite. I understand Mrs. Bennett has retained you to help resolve her son's marital situation. I wanted to save everyone some time and money by clarifying my position. Of course, we're hoping to avoid unnecessary litigation. There won't be any litigation because there's nothing to litigate. Miles ended our marriage, I accepted his decision, and now we're getting divorced. The only question is whether he wants to do this the easy way or the hard way. Mrs. Bennett seems to think there might be room for reconciliation. Mrs. Bennett is welcome to think whatever she likes. But her son is the one who decided our marriage was over, and I'm not in the business of changing the minds of men who don't want to be married to me. I see. And the financial arrangements? Will be handled according to Washington state law. 50-50 split of marital assets, no alimony since we both work. Simple and straightforward. That seems reasonable. I'm a very reasonable person. It's one of the qualities Miles found boring about me. After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch. Not our couch, my couch, and contemplated the view from my living room window. The city lights twinkled below, and for the first time in months, the future felt like something to look forward to rather than endure. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is David, Miles's brother. Can we meet for coffee? I think there's been a misunderstanding. I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, The only misunderstanding is Miles thinking he could have his cake and eat it too. Tell him I said good luck with that. Then I turned off my phone and ran a hot bath. Tomorrow I'd start looking for a good divorce attorney. Tonight, I was going to soak in my tub, drink my wine, and enjoy the sound of silence. 3 days later, Caroline cornered me in the building's mailroom with the determined expression of someone who'd been planning this ambush. We need to talk, she said, blocking my path to the elevator. You've been avoiding me, and frankly, I think you're handling this whole situation badly. Am I? I said, sorting through my mail with deliberate calm. How exactly should I be handling my husband leaving me for another woman? With a little more dignity, for starters. The whole building is talking about the scene in the parking lot. Margaret Bennett is a respected woman in this community, and you embarrassed her. I looked up from my mail. Caroline was dressed in her usual uniform of expensive athleisure wear and righteous indignation. She'd appointed herself the moral authority of our building's social circle, and she clearly expected me to defer to her judgment. Margaret Bennett's respect is based on her ability to write checks and intimidate people. I'm not impressed by either. You're being vindictive, Adeline. Miles made a mistake, but that doesn't mean you have to destroy him. I'm not destroying him. I'm just not saving him from the consequences of his choices. Caroline crossed her arms. We've been friends for 3 years. I'm trying to help you. Are you? Because it sounds like you're trying to help Miles. Again. That's not fair, isn't it? When did you start caring more about my husband's feelings than mine? When did you decide that I was the problem in my own marriage? Caroline's face flushed. I never said that. You didn't have to. Every time I complained about Miles working late, you told me to be more understanding. Every time I mentioned feeling disconnected from him, you suggested I needed to try harder. You spent 3 years treating my marriage like a group project where I was the underperforming partner. I was trying to be supportive. You were trying to be Switzerland. The problem with neutrality, Caroline, is that it only benefits the aggressor. I pushed past her toward the elevator, but she wasn't done. Fine, she called after me. But don't expect the rest of us to choose sides in your drama. Some of us have better things to do than get involved in other people's messy divorces. I turned back to face her. You're absolutely right. You should definitely stay out of it. In fact, why don't you stay out of my life entirely? The elevator doors closed on Caroline's shocked expression, and I felt a familiar sense of surgical precision. Another toxic relationship cleanly severed. Upstairs, I found a package waiting outside my door. No return address, but I recognized Miles's handwriting on the label. Inside was a jewelry box containing my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one I'd worn on our wedding day, and a note. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I couldn't keep this. It belongs with your family. I'm sorry for everything. I hope someday you can forgive me. Miles. I held the necklace up to the light, remembering the day my grandmother had given it to me. For your wedding day, she'd said, and for all the important moments after that. She'd died 2 years later, never knowing that her pearls would outlast the marriage they'd blessed. My phone rang. Amy, one of the younger nurses from the hospital. Hey, are you okay? I heard about you and your husband. That sucks. Amy was 26, recently divorced herself, and refreshingly direct about life's disappointments. I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. Good for you. Listen, a bunch of us are going out for drinks tonight. You should come. It's time you started having some fun. I looked around my quiet apartment, then at the pearls in my hand. You know what? That sounds perfect. The bar was crowded and loud, filled with the kind of people who worked hard all week and played harder on Friday nights. Amy had assembled a group of hospital staff, nurses, technicians, and a couple of residents who looked like they'd rather be sleeping. To Adeline, Amy announced, raising her beer, for proving that some people are better off alone than with the wrong person. I'll drink to that, I said, clinking my glass against hers. The conversation flowed easily, jumping from work gossip to dating disasters to plans for the weekend. It struck me how long it had been since I'd been out with people who actually enjoyed my company. Miles had always found my work friends too loud or unprofessional. Looking back, I realized he'd been systematically isolating me from anyone who might have pointed out his flaws. Around 10 o'clock, I excused myself to use the restroom and found Julia waiting by the sinks. We need to talk, she said without preamble. No, we really don't. Miles is falling apart. He's been calling me constantly, showing up at my apartment, sending flowers to my office. It's getting weird. I touched up my lipstick in the mirror. Sounds like a personal problem. He says he made a mistake leaving you, that he wants to work things out. And what did you tell him? Julia was quiet for a moment. I told him it was too late for that. I turned to face her. Smart girl, you're learning. Look, I know you hate me. I don't hate you, Julia. I don't think about you at all. You were just the catalyst for something that was going to happen anyway. If it hadn't been you, it would have been someone else. He really did love you, you know. Maybe, but he loved the idea of something better more. I left Julia in the restroom and rejoined my friends. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and bad karaoke. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Sharp, funny, confident. The person I'd been before, I'd started measuring my worth by Miles's satisfaction. When I got home around midnight, I found 3 voicemails from Miles. The first was apologetic, the second was angry, and the third was drunk and rambling. I know I screwed up, okay? I know I hurt you, but we had 8 good years, Adeline. That has to count for something. Julia says I'm an idiot. My mother says I'm an idiot. Even David says I'm an idiot. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am an idiot. But I'm an idiot who misses his wife. I deleted all 3 messages without listening to them completely and went to bed. Saturday morning brought a knock at my door. Through the security camera, I could see David Bennett standing in the hallway with his ever-present clipboard and the expression of a man on a mission he didn't particularly want to be on. I opened the door but left the chain lock engaged. What can I do for you, David? I brought coffee, he said, holding up a tray from the expensive place downstairs. And pastries. Can we talk? We're talking now. David sighed. Adeline, I know my brother screwed up. I know he hurt you. But he's my brother, and he's drowning. I'm trying to throw him a life preserver here. He's not drowning, David. He's learning to swim. There's a difference. He loves you. He loves the idea of not having to face the consequences of his actions. That's not the same thing. David shifted the coffee tray to one hand and pulled out his phone. I have a proposal, a structured reconciliation plan with clear benchmarks and accountability measures. I stared at him. You made a PowerPoint presentation about my marriage? It's more of a framework for moving forward. David, stop. Just stop. Your brother is a grown man who made a choice. I'm a grown woman who's accepting that choice. There's no framework or benchmark or structured plan that's going to change that. But you loved him too. I did. Past tense. And because I loved him, I'm not going to enable him to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. David looked deflated. So what am I supposed to tell him? Tell him to grow up. Tell him to stop sending other people to fight his battles. Tell him to figure out what he actually wants instead of what he thinks he's supposed to want. After David left, I spent the afternoon doing something I hadn't done in years. Exactly what I wanted to do. I painted my nails, ordered Chinese takeout, and binge-watched an entire season of a show Miles had always hated. Around 6, my phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. Heard you were out last night. Hope you're not doing anything you'll regret. I typed back, The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. She responded immediately. You're going to push away everyone who cares about you. The people who actually care about me aren't going anywhere. The people who don't were never really here to begin with. My phone stayed silent after that. Sunday evening, I was getting ready for another week of work when Marcus called from the front desk. Your husband is here again, he said. Wants to come up and talk to you. Should I call security? I thought about it for a moment. Miles had been trying to reach me for a week through intermediaries and voicemails. Maybe it was time to have the conversation he seemed so desperate for. Send him up, but tell him he has 10 minutes, and then he's trespassing. 5 minutes later, Miles stood outside my door looking like he hadn't slept in days. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was disheveled, and he had the hollow-eyed look of a man who'd been forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about himself. Thank you for seeing me, he said through the chain lock. 10 minutes, talk. I made a mistake. A huge, stupid, life-destroying mistake. I know that now. Good for you. What do you want me to do about it? I want you to give me another chance. I want us to try again. I looked at this man I'd been married to for 8 years. This stranger who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my daily routines. Why? Because I love you. No, Miles. Why do you want another chance? Is it because you miss me? Because you realized what we had was worth fighting for? Or is it because Julia turned out to be less interested in damaged goods than you expected? Miles was quiet for a long moment. Does it matter? It's the only thing that matters. I miss you, he said finally. I miss us. I miss the life we built together. You destroyed that life. You can't miss something you chose to throw away. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Miles. Mistakes are accidental. You planned this. You cultivated a relationship with another woman while you were married to me. You lied to me for months. You ended our marriage via text message. Those weren't mistakes. They were choices. Miles pressed his forehead against the door. So, that's it? 8 years means nothing? 8 years means everything. That's why I'm not going to spend the next 8 years trying to fix something you broke on purpose. Adeline, please. Your 10 minutes are up. I closed the door and listened to his footsteps retreating down the hallway. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, put on some music, and started planning my new life. Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor to the hospital. Margaret Bennett stood at the nurse's station in full battle regalia. Chanel suit, pearl earrings, and the imperious expression of someone accustomed to getting her way through sheer force of will. "I need to speak with Adeline Crawford," she announced to Amy, who was manning the desk. Amy looked at me with raised eyebrows. I nodded and walked over, curious to see what Margaret's next move would be. "Mrs. Bennett, this is a surprise. We need to talk, privately." I led her to a small conference room used for family meetings. Margaret sat down and arranged her purse and gloves with the precision of someone preparing for a business negotiation. "I'll get straight to the point," she said. "My son made a mistake. A terrible, foolish mistake. But that doesn't mean 2 lives should be destroyed because of it." "I'm not destroying anything, Margaret. I'm just not rebuilding it. Miles is falling apart. He's lost weight. He's not sleeping. He's making mistakes at work. Julia won't speak to him. He's talking about leaving Seattle entirely." I felt a flicker of something. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition of genuine pain. "I'm sorry he's struggling, but that's not my responsibility anymore." "You could help him." "I could, but I won't." Margaret's composure cracked slightly. "Why? What did our family ever do to you? I welcomed you with open arms. I treated you like a daughter." "You treated me like an accessory to Miles's life, the appropriate wife for a successful man. You never once asked what I wanted or needed or dreamed about. I was just part of the package that made your son look good." "That's not true." "Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked about my job or my interests or my opinions about anything that didn't directly relate to Miles?" Margaret was quiet for a moment. "I thought you were happy." "I was trying to be. There's a difference." "So this is revenge? You're punishing Miles because you weren't happy?" I leaned forward. "Margaret, your son didn't leave me because I was unhappy. He left me because he was unhappy. He found someone who made him feel excited and alive and important. The fact that it didn't work out the way he expected isn't my fault." "But you could forgive him?" "I could, but forgiveness doesn't mean going back to a situation that wasn't working for either of us." Margaret gathered her things with sharp, angry movements. "You're making a mistake, Adeline. Miles is a good man. He's a decent man who made some bad choices, but he's not my man anymore." After Margaret left, I threw myself into work with renewed focus. 3 cardiac surgeries, 2 emergency procedures, and a successful resuscitation kept me busy until well past my usual shift end. There was something satisfying about problems that had clear solutions and outcomes that depended on skill rather than luck. Around 8 p.m., I was finishing my paperwork when Amy approached with a concerned expression. "There's a guy in the parking garage asking about you. Security talked to him, but he says he's your husband and he just wants to talk." I sighed. "Thanks for the heads up. I'll handle it." The parking garage was dimly lit and mostly empty at this hour. I found Miles leaning against his BMW, looking like a man who'd reached the end of his rope. He straightened up when he saw me approaching. "Before you say anything," he said, "I know I shouldn't be here. I know you don't want to see me, but I had to try one more time." "Miles, I talked to a therapist today, Dr. Patricia Reeves. She said I need to take responsibility for my actions and stop trying to manage other people's reactions to them." "Smart woman." "She also said I need to figure out what I actually want instead of what I think I'm supposed to want." I unlocked my car but didn't get in. "And what do you want?" Miles was quiet for a long moment. "I want to not feel like a complete failure. I want to not have destroyed the best thing in my life for something that turned out to be an illusion. I want to go back in time and make different choices." "Those are all things you can't have. What do you want that's actually possible?" "I want you to not hate me." I looked at this man who'd shared 8 years of my life, who'd seen me at my best and worst, who'd promised to love me forever, and then changed his mind. "I don't hate you, Miles. I'm disappointed in you. I'm angry about how you handled things, but I don't hate you." "That's something, I guess." "It's everything. Hate would mean I still cared enough to want to hurt you. I don't." Miles flinched as if I'd slapped him. "So that's it? You just don't care anymore?" "I care about the person you used to be. I care about the good memories we made together. I care about you being okay eventually, but I don't care about being part of your life anymore. Because of Julia. Because of you. Julia was just the symptom, Miles. You were the disease." He was quiet for a long time. "I know I don't deserve it, but is there any chance—" "No." The finality in my voice seemed to break something in him. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment he looked like the young man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, vulnerable and uncertain, and desperately hoping for someone to tell him everything would be okay. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. for all of it. For hurting you, for lying to you, for being such a coward about the whole thing. I know you are. Will you be okay? Without me, I mean? I got into my car and rolled down the window. Miles, I've been okay without you for months. I just didn't realize it until you left. I drove home through the city streets, past the restaurant where we'd had our first date, past the park where he'd proposed, past all the landmarks of a life I was finally ready to leave behind. Back at the apartment, I found a bottle of champagne in the back of the refrigerator, left over from some celebration I couldn't even remember. I opened it and poured myself a glass, then raised it in a toast to no one in particular. To new beginnings, I said aloud, and drank deeply. My phone buzzed with a text from Amy. How did it go with your ex? I typed back, it went exactly how it needed to. Good. You deserve better. I deserve what I'm willing to settle for, and I'm not willing to settle anymore. The next few days passed quietly. Miles stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped sending intermediaries to plead his case. Margaret went back to Scottsdale. David returned to his own life and problems. Even Caroline seemed to have gotten the message that our friendship was over. For the first time in months, my life felt peaceful. Friday afternoon, I was leaving the hospital when I ran into Julia in the parking lot. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, hair that hadn't seen a stylist in weeks, the general appearance of someone whose carefully constructed life had fallen apart. Adeline, she said, approaching hesitantly. Can we talk? What about? Miles, he's not doing well. So I've heard. He's been calling me constantly, showing up at my apartment, my office. He keeps saying he made a mistake, that he wants to work things out with you. I unlocked my car. What do you want me to do about it? Talk to him. Tell him it's really over. He won't believe it from anyone else. I've told him, multiple times. But he thinks... Julia stopped and looked away. He thinks if he can just find the right words, the right gesture, he can fix this. And you want me to crush that hope? I want you to help him accept reality, for both our sakes. I studied Julia's face, noting the desperation there. He's making your life difficult. He's making everyone's life difficult. His work is suffering. His friends are avoiding him. His family is fed up. He's obsessed with getting you back. That's not obsession, Julia. That's guilt. He's not trying to get me back because he loves me. He's trying to undo the consequences of his choices. Either way, it needs to stop. I got into my car. You're right. It does need to stop. But that's Miles's job, not mine. Adeline, please. You wanted him, Julia. You got him. Now deal with what you got. I drove away, leaving Julia standing in the parking lot with the same lost expression Miles had been wearing for weeks. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I made plans that had nothing to do with anyone else's schedule or preferences. I bought tickets to a concert Miles would have hated, made dinner reservations at a restaurant he'd found too ethnic, and invited Amy to join me for both. This is nice, Amy said over Thai food and wine. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to? I thought about it. I honestly can't remember. That's sad. It's educational. I'm learning the difference between being alone and being lonely. And? I was lonely for years while I was married. Now I'm alone, and I'm not lonely at all. Amy raised her glass. To the difference. To the difference, I agreed, and meant it. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I signed them at my kitchen table while drinking coffee and eating toast, treating the end of my marriage with the same casual efficiency I'd use to pay a utility bill. 8 years reduced to legal documents and property division. The apartment would be sold, proceeds split 50-50. Retirement accounts divided according to state law, no alimony, no ongoing financial entanglement, clean and simple, exactly as I'd wanted. I was sealing the envelope to return the signed papers when my phone rang. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the therapist Miles had mentioned. Mrs. Crawford, I hope you don't mind me calling. Miles gave me your number and suggested I might be able to help facilitate a conversation between you two. Did he now? He seems to think there are unresolved issues that might benefit from professional mediation. I set down my coffee cup. Doctor, Reeves, with all due respect, the only unresolved issue is Miles's inability to accept that some things can't be fixed. I understand you're angry. I'm not angry. I'm done. There's a difference. Sometimes couples counseling can help even when the relationship is ending. It can provide closure, help both parties move forward in a healthier way. I'm moving forward just fine. If Miles needs professional help processing his choices, that's between you and him. He's struggling with guilt and regret? Good. He should be. Guilt and regret are appropriate responses to hurting people you claim to love. Dr. Reeves was quiet for a moment. You're not interested in forgiveness? I've forgiven him. That doesn't mean I want to have dinner with him. After I hung up, I called my own lawyer to confirm the papers had been received and processed. Everything was in order. In 6 weeks, I'd be officially single again. The thought should have been depressing. Instead, it felt like the first day of spring after a long, difficult winter. Work that day was busy but routine. 3 post-op patients, 2 pre-surgical consultations, and a successful angioplasty that reminded me why I'd chosen cardiac nursing in the first place. There was something deeply satisfying about work that made a tangible difference in people's lives. During my lunch break, I got a call from Marcus downstairs. Your ex-husband is here, he said. He's not asking to come up, just wanted me to give you a message. What message? He said to tell you the papers are signed and he's moving to Portland next week. New job, fresh start. He wanted to say goodbye. I looked out my office window at the city skyline, processing this information. Miles was leaving Seattle, leaving everything we'd built together, everything that reminded him of his failures. Tell him I said good luck, I said finally. That's it? That's it. That evening, I stopped by the apartment complex's community room where the monthly residents' meeting was being held. I hadn't attended one in over a year. Miles had always found them boring and pointless, but I was curious to reconnect with my neighbors now that I was staying. The meeting was exactly as tedious as Miles had predicted, full of discussions about landscaping budgets and parking regulations. But during the social hour afterward, I found myself actually enjoying the conversations. Without Miles's judgmental commentary running in the background, I could appreciate these people for who they were rather than how they measured up to his standards. Caroline was there, of course, holding court near the wine table with her usual group of followers. She caught my eye across the room and approached with the cautious expression of someone testing the waters. Adeline, how are you holding up? I'm doing well, thanks. I heard Miles is moving to Portland, so I understand. Caroline waited for me to elaborate, but I didn't take the bait. Finally, she tried a different approach. I hope we can put our disagreement behind us, as we were good friends for a long time. I considered this. Caroline and I had been friends of a sort. We'd shared gossip and wine and complaints about building management, but had we ever really known each other? Had she ever seen me as anything more than half of the couple Miles and Adeline? We were friendly, I said finally. I'm not sure we were ever actually friends. Caroline's face flushed. That's harsh. It's honest. Friends support each other during difficult times. They don't spend those times explaining why the person being hurt is partially to blame for their own pain. I was trying to be balanced. You were trying to avoid taking sides. The problem with that approach, Caroline, is that sometimes one side is clearly wrong. Sometimes neutrality is just cowardice with better PR. I walked away before she could respond, leaving Caroline to explain the conversation to her audience. Near the refreshment table, I struck up a conversation with Mrs. Chen from the 3rd floor, a retired librarian who'd always seemed interesting, but whom Miles had dismissed as boring. We talked about books and travel and the challenges of living alone in a city designed for couples. She was funny and insightful, and I found myself wondering what other interesting people I'd missed while filtering my social life through Miles's preferences. You seem different, Mrs. Chen observed. Lighter, somehow. I feel different, like I've been holding my breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale. Divorce can be liberating, even when it's painful. Were you married? For 35 years. My husband died 3 years ago. I thought I'd be lost without him, but I discovered I'd forgotten who I was with him. It's been an interesting journey, remembering. On my way home, I ran into Amy in the lobby. She was coming back from a date, glowing with the particular energy of someone whose romantic life was full of possibility. How did it go? I asked. Really well. He's a pediatric surgeon. Brilliant, funny, and he actually listens when I talk. Novel concept, right? Revolutionary. We rode the elevator up together, and Amy studied my face with the professional assessment skills of a good nurse. You look happy, she said. Really happy, not just putting on a brave face happy. I am happy. It's weird. Why is it weird? I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the loneliness to hit, or the regret, or the fear about the future. But it's not happening. Maybe because you're not actually alone. You're just not with the wrong person anymore. The elevator reached my floor, and I paused in the doorway. Amy, thank you for being a real friend during all this. That's what friends do. They show up when it matters. Inside my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch, definitely my couch now, to review the day. The divorce papers were filed, Miles was leaving town, and I was officially beginning the next chapter of my life. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Miles. I'm leaving tomorrow. I wanted to say thank you." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "For what?" "For not making this uglier than it had to be. For being the person I should have appreciated while I had the chance. For showing me what integrity looks like." I read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations didn't need to be finished. Instead, I opened my laptop and started browsing travel websites. I had vacation time saved up, money in my own bank account, and no one to consult about my plans. The freedom was intoxicating. By midnight, I'd booked a trip to Italy, something I'd wanted to do for years but had never pursued because Miles preferred more practical vacations. I'd eat pasta and drink wine and wander through museums without anyone complaining about the cost or the crowds or the inefficiency of Italian public transportation. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows and the realization that I could sleep in the middle of the bed forever if I wanted to. No one would complain about my alarm clock or my reading light or the way I stole the covers. At work, Mrs. Patterson was being discharged after a full recovery from her cardiac surgery. Her daughter had brought flowers and balloons, and the whole family was gathered to take her home. "There's my favorite nurse," Mrs. Patterson said when I came to check her final vitals. "I have something for you." She handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a heart charm. "It belonged to my mother," she said. "She always said hearts were meant to be strong, not just soft. I thought you might appreciate the reminder." I fastened the bracelet around my wrist, touched by the gesture. "Thank you. This means more than you know." "You saved my life, dear. The least I can do is give you something pretty to remember me by." As I walked Mrs. Patterson to the discharge area, she squeezed my arm. "You're going to be just fine, you know. Better than fine? You're going to be happy?" "I already am," I said, and realized it was completely true. That afternoon, I got a call from the real estate agent handling the sale of the apartment. We'd received an offer, a good one, above asking price from a young couple who'd fallen in love with the place. "They want to close quickly," the agent said. "Cash buyers, no contingencies. You could be out by the end of the month if you want." "Perfect," I said. "Let's do it." After work, I drove through the city one last time as a married woman. Past the hospital where I'd built my career, past the neighborhoods where Miles and I had looked at houses we'd never bought, past the coffee shop where we'd had our first fight, and the restaurant where we'd celebrated our last anniversary. It was a good life we'd built together for a while. But it was a life that had required me to be smaller than I was, quieter than I wanted to be, more accommodating than was healthy. I'd been a supporting character in my own story, and I was ready to be the protagonist again. Back at the apartment, I started packing in earnest. 8 years of accumulated stuff, most of which I realized I didn't actually want or need. I filled boxes for charity, bags for the trash, and a small suitcase with the things that actually mattered to me. My grandmother's pearls, photo albums from before my marriage, books Miles had never liked, the coffee mug Amy had given me last Christmas with "World's Best Nurse" printed on the side. As I worked, I found myself humming, something I hadn't done in months. The apartment felt lighter with each box I packed, as if I was excavating my real life from under layers of compromise and accommodation. My phone rang around 9 p.m. Margaret's number appeared on the screen, and for once I answered. "Adeline, I wanted to call before Miles left town, to apologize." This was unexpected. For what? For not seeing how unhappy you both were. For assuming that because you seemed like the perfect couple, you actually were perfect for each other. "We weren't perfect for each other, Margaret. We were just good at pretending to be. Miles told me what you said about me treating you like an accessory to his life. You were right. I'm sorry for that." I sat down on my couch, surprised by the genuine regret in Margaret's voice. "Thank you for saying that." "Are you going to be okay? Financially, I mean. If you need anything?" "I'm going to be fine. Better than fine. I believe that. You're stronger than I gave you credit for." After Margaret hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment and marveled at how different everything felt. The same furniture, the same walls, the same view out the windows. But the energy was completely changed, as if a weight had been lifted that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. 3 weeks later, I handed over the keys to the young couple who'd bought the apartment. They were glowing with the excitement of new homeowners, full of plans for renovations and dinner parties, and the life they were going to build together. "Any advice?" the wife asked as we completed the final walkthrough. I thought about it. Don't lose yourselves trying to become the couple you think you're supposed to be. The best relationships happen when two complete people choose to share their lives, not when two incomplete people try to become whole by merging. They nodded politely, probably thinking I was just another bitter divorcee dispensing unwanted wisdom. Maybe they were right, but maybe, if they were lucky, they'd remember those words someday when they needed them. I moved into a smaller place across town, a cozy one-bedroom with hardwood floors and a view of the mountains. It was half the size of the apartment I'd shared with Miles, and twice as comfortable. Amy helped me move the last of my boxes, and we celebrated with pizza and wine on my new living room floor. "So what's next?" she asked. "Italy in 2 weeks, then back to work, back to life, back to figuring out what I actually want instead of what I think I should want." "Any regrets?" I considered the question seriously. "About the divorce? No. About the marriage? Only that it took me so long to realize it wasn't working. And Miles? I hope he figures out how to be happy, but that's not my job anymore." 6 months later, I was in my office at the hospital when Amy knocked on the door with a peculiar expression on her face. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "I just ran into Julia Whitman at the coffee shop downtown." "And?" "She's engaged. To some guy from her yoga class. Apparently she and Miles lasted about 3 weeks after you guys separated." I looked up from the patient charts I was reviewing. "Good for her." "That's it? Good for her?" "Amy, Julia was never the problem. She was just the excuse Miles needed to blow up a life that wasn't making him happy. If it hadn't been her, it would have been someone else. Or something else. The problem was that Miles didn't know how to be honest about what he wanted." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he'd just talked to you instead of having an affair?" I thought about it. "We probably would have gotten divorced anyway, but it would have been kinder, and we might have stayed friends." "Any word from him?" "Christmas card from Portland. He's doing well, apparently. New job, new apartment, new life. I'm happy for him." And I was. The anger and hurt had faded over the months, replaced by something closer to indifference. Miles was a chapter in my life that had ended, not a wound that still needed tending. That evening, I had dinner with Mrs. Chen and 2 other women from my building, a book club that had evolved into a genuine friendship circle. We talked about work and travel and the books we were reading, and I realized this was what I'd been missing during my marriage. Relationships where I could be completely myself without editing or accommodating or compromising. "You seem settled," Mrs. Chen observed as we were leaving the restaurant. Content. "I am. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I want to be." "And where is that?" I looked around at the city lights, at my friends, at the life I'd built for myself from the ruins of my marriage. Right here, right now, completely and entirely my own person. Walking home alone through the quiet streets, I felt the deep satisfaction of a life reclaimed. I'd lost a husband, but I'd found myself. The trade had been more than worth it. My phone buzzed with a text from Amy. "Drinks tomorrow? There's a new guy at the hospital I think you'd like." I typed back, "Maybe, but I'm not looking for anything serious." "Who says it has to be serious? Maybe just fun?" I smiled and put my phone away. Maybe fun was exactly what I needed, or maybe not. The beautiful thing was, it was entirely up to me. Back in my apartment, I made tea and sat by the window, watching the city settle into sleep. Tomorrow I'd go back to work, back to saving lives and making a difference in the world. Next month I'd take another trip, maybe to Greece this time. Next year, who knew? The future stretched ahead of me, full of possibility and entirely my own to shape. I'd learned the difference between being alone and being lonely, between settling and choosing, between surviving and thriving. Miles had done me a favor, though he'd never understand it that way. By leaving, he'd given me back my life. By choosing Julia, he'd forced me to choose myself. I raised my teacup in a silent toast to the woman I'd become, stronger, wiser, and finally completely free.